What's up, everybody? It's Topicx here, bringing you another commentary. This time it's a plus 14 Dawnbreaker. I know that you guys have been asking for these and you really like them, so here's another one on a dungeon I haven't done yet. So going to this first pull, we're not lusting because you always want to hold for a second pull. Dawnbreaker, the one on the ship's a little bit harder, but you basically just want to focus these shadow mages down. They just constantly chain cast, and the casts do hurt on high keys. These night bolts will hurt, and there's also like a channel that they do. So just focus those, kill those. I usually pop wall going into this pull just so I don't take a bunch of damage. But that's about it. I don't really use any other defensives here other than just wall on pull and keeping mitigation up. Next, doing the ship pull, so I'm going to gather these and pull them over to the side where the other three run in, and then I AoE taunt right away. This is where we send all of our CDs. You can see that we sent Lust up here. Just want to make sure that you kick the Shadow Mage and someone kicks the Fear from the Commander. Usually I'll kick the Fear from the Commander unless we've talked about otherwise beforehand. It's just easy that the tank kicks it, make sure it doesn't go off. Don't be afraid to pop defensives here. It is a tough pull. You know, I popped Last Stand. I think I already popped a shield wall. And I rallied for our team as well because my party's taking a lot of damage. The casts. For those of you that don't know, here are the party defensives and like raid defensives. And here's everybody else's CDs and defensives, like offensive and defensively up here. So if you guys want to keep an eye on that throughout the key. So I go to the ship with the 4 ads first. Usually because nobody has CDs yet after that big pull on the ship, and this pull is actually a little bit easier. So you want to do it first. The pull on the other ship is harder because it has the commander. So just want to kick these 2 casters as much as possible. Don't be afraid to use the defensive again. These packs do hurt tanks a lot, so you can pop defensives here, don't worry about it, but your CDs probably aren't up yet, but they will be up for the next pull. As I can see, I'm going to have Spear and Avatar for the next pull, and my DPS looks like they're going to have CDs, all of them. Mage has Mage is about to have combustion, but DK and the Boomy have CDs. So I kick the Fear here. And then I use my offensive CDs. There's also a bleed that gets put on you, the Tainted Slash. So if you're in a bad spot and you're kind of unhealthy and that bleed gets put on you, don't be afraid to dwarf. If you have dwarf racial, I just did that from the bleed. And don't be afraid to defensive. I have a wall use here. If you get a little bit unhealthy, just pop that wall defensive. Help out your healer. As you guys can kind of see from these past commentaries, it's pretty normal to use a lot of defensives. You know, as a tank in higher keys, your defensives are basically always on CD. There's no point in holding them unless you have a specific tank buster that you need to hold them for. But if you're just doing trash, just send your defensives. There's no point in holding. Like I said, just help smooth out damage for yourself and your healer. So pulling this boss, it does a few casts. You just want to make sure you kick them. And this Obsidian Beam is a huge tank buster. You will most likely die in high keys if you don't pop a defensive here. unless you have like perfect mitigation up. So I think that first one there, I popped wall. You can use spell block on this one. It's coming up in 10 seconds here if you look at the bottom of my bars. So I won't have it here, so I pop wall. As you can see, it chunks me for like 38% even with wall, so without wall it probably would have chunked me for like 70%, which is kind of scary. I think as a 14, I think I can actually probably live that tank buster with no defensive as long as I have shield block and a lot of ignore pain up. But on a 15-16 you may die without that. So now I pop spell block. You can see it like basically does nothing to me because it just blocks that entire beam. So spell block is super OP on this boss. Prot warrior defensives in general are OP on this boss. We're basically able to have something up for every single cast. Some tanks may not be that way. You might have to fiddle around a little bit more, but Prot warrior, you just have a defensive every single time one of those casts go off, whether it's wall, spell block, last stand. So I'm going to come back in here. You want to make sure that you don't try and cheese that explosion too much. You can easily get killed if you get too close. Just wait until it's done and then fly in. But I want to talk about positioning on this boss. So when forming a group, I would ideally just go at least 2 ranged. Always, because this boss is just terrible with 3 melee. You have to have a melee like run out to the side preemptively, which just usually never happens. So run 2 range so that they can bait those pools up to the side, because if you don't, it's tough. It's really tough to pull the boss away. The boss stands still a lot and casts. As you can see here, like I barely pulled the boss away in time from these puddles. I have done so many keys where I haven't been able to pull the boss away because we ran triple melee and the melee wasn't baiting properly, so just run 2 ranged. In Modern Mythic Plus, I've found that it's often best to just never run triple melee if you can avoid it. I know there are groups that do, but those groups are usually pre-mades and they've been playing together for a while, so they have good comms, good planning, so it's not usually too much of an issue. So after this, we fly down, and the situation is not ideal right now. As you can see, I have no defensives at all available, which means that boss lasted a little bit long, so our DPS wasn't that great on that boss. You want it to die before you have no defensives left, because this is a tough pull and you want a defensive for it, which I'll have wall coming up soon, but it's still not ideal. So I want to pause this for a second. Most routes go to the church after this and do a huge pull. At the point of filming this video, I don't think that I had practiced that very often or was comfortable with it. Today I am doing it. It's just like a 7 or 8 pack pull in front of the church. It's a tough pull on Prot Warrior because Prot Warrior has a little bit harder time gathering mobs as opposed to Prot Paladin, just because the only ranged ability we have to gather mobs is the throw axe, which is just a single target ability. So like unless you're standing there throwing 7-8 axes separately at mobs, you basically have to charge to them or leap to them. So definitely harder gathering the church pull. So if you're not comfortable with it, you can easily do up to probably a 16 on this dungeon without doing that church pull, because there is enough time. So this is a 14. Just to be safe, I'm doing this this double pull in the corner here with the 6 mobs, as you'll see. So I just wanted to explain kind of my logic there. But again, this is actually a very hard pull still, because you have a triple tactician, which is just a lot of melee swings on your tank. So I'm going to finish gathering these. And don't be afraid to damage pot here, use every single defensive, because this is, at least on the route that I'm doing this dungeon, this is probably the hardest pull for the tank. The Umbral Rush from the Shadow Walker is also a big melee hit, so you basically have like 4 mobs just completely destroying your tank with melee hits in this pull if you do decide to do it. And I think this used to be a common pull to do earlier in the season before routes were optimized, so it wouldn't shock me if people see it in pugs, but it's not effective currently with the best routes, so. Don't be afraid to kite here if you're playing a tank that gets destroyed by these mobs either. They're pure physical, so if they're not by you, they can't do anything. So we finish this pull off and we go to this other pull. This other pull is pretty standard. I haven't really seen a route that isn't doing it. This 5-pack, so it just has 2 casters and then 3 melee mobs. A little bit easier for your tank, but you could still fall over if you're not paying attention. Don't be afraid to use defensives here again. Again, as you can see, it's a theme. You know, you pretty much want to be using defensives if you feel unhealthy on trash mobs. There's no point in holding them in high keys unless you're saving them for a tank buster, like I said. So some pulls, it's also good to send a defensive as you're pulling. For example, the pull in front of the church, I do recommend doing that because there are the shadow walkers that charge towards you almost immediately. So if you're doing the church pull, I would send defensive as you're gathering 100%. And I'd probably send Demoralizing Shout if you have it immediately too on the church pull. You're going to see here in a second, I only do a smaller version of it just because I hadn't practiced the bigger one at the point of filming this video. But even in the small version, it's fine to send Shield Wall and Demoralizing Shout on pull, just to help smooth out that initial damage intake. Oh, it looks like we're doing the church pull after because Lust is up, so in Dawnbreaker you always want to head to this orb mini-boss as soon as Lust is up. Just for timer purposes, there's no point in holding Lust. You might as well just come here and send it. So I grab these mobs, and then I pull the mini boss in with it. This is a very standard pull. Some groups actually pull extra mobs behind them, like maybe the patrol. There's like a patrol trash mob I've seen pulled in here too. So this is quite an easy pull for Prot Warrior. Just keep your mitigation up. You may not even have to use defensive. Yeah, send your offensive CDs, you Lust, you damage pot here. Your group usually blasts this down, and it's not too hard of a pull for Prot Warrior, so nothing too much to say here. Make sure you point the frontals away from your group. I usually stand on this side because I know my group is pointing the frontals down under the bridge, so I usually stand like right here with it. So now that that's out of the way, Lust is on CD again. We're gonna go back to the church and do the church pull. So landing in the middle here is also best, just for gathering. But as you can see here, I just do a 5-pack instead of like a 7-pack. So I'm gonna go to there. They're gonna Umbral Rush me. You can see that initial damage hit. And I did pop wall, so I pressed wall before I gathered them just to help out that initial damage hit. Yeah, now it's just a matter of sustaining yourself here and kicking the casts. With these Shadow Walkers, I also wanted to say, if you need to stun them, they are stunnable. So if they're about to do an Umbral Rush and you don't have defensives, or maybe you're like really unhealthy and they're about to do it, just stun them to kind of delay it a little bit, and may help you get the mitigation of the defensives up that you need. So yeah, I'm about to pull the rest on the stairs. So as you can see, I split this pull. Finishing this mob off here just so I don't get hit in the back while I go gather the rest. So I'm waiting for shield block to come up there. That's why I waited a second, because I didn't have shield block, and if you run into that pack without mitigation, you actually might fall over just because there's the 2 Umbral Rushels that hit you right away. So yeah, again, some tanks may pull all this together, the stuff on the stairs with the stuff down, which is fine. I just hadn't practiced it a lot, and it's a low key, so, well, relatively low that you don't really need to do that if you don't want to play clean. So after we finish this off, we're going to do the mini boss inside, and I always pull this 2-pack with mini boss, also very common in most keys. You just want to try avoid pulling the mini boss by itself because it's just ineffective. So we'll come over here, kick this Darkcaster, and then we're going to head inside. And if you LOS these mobs, they'll just run inside the building. So that's what I recommend doing. And pull mini boss into the corner here because you can just put your back against the wall to take the tank hit. So that Darkcaster's kind of sitting there casting because one of the DPS is in line of sight. So there we go. Now it's inside. For this tank hit, you don't actually need to press defensive at all. I've done this even on a 15. It almost does nothing. If you have shield block and ignore pain up, you don't need defensive for this. So as you can see here, it did nothing. I decided to press wall there. I probably didn't have to, but I knew that it was safe to do so because, you know, mini boss still at 50%, and I knew that my defensives were going to come back up anyway, so I said might as well send it. There's no point in not sending defensive if you can, so again, I didn't have any defensive there, and it only did like 20% HP, so as long as you have shield block and ignore pain up, this thing is fine. I would assume even on a 16, it's probably fine with no defensive on the tank hit. I know that the house pull with the mini boss is coming up next, and that pull is definitely harder than this pull, so you want defensives for that one as a tank. So yeah, you want a defensive on pull usually, so I think I'm gonna send shield wall on pull. Yeah, so I pop shield wall as soon as I land. I get my shield block up immediately because these things are going to destroy you when you land if you have nothing. And you'll take quite a bit of damage and start the pull unhealthy, which you never want. So I just recommend popping defensive as you land here always. And then this is one of those pulls where you kind of just press defensive if you need to and don't really worry too much about it. They will come back up for second boss in time, so I wouldn't worry about that. The Shadowy Decay does a lot of damage, right? So you want to make sure you're healthy for the healer, and the healer doesn't have to worry about you because the healer's going to be topping up DPS on this pull a lot as they get the dot. And they also take the AoE damage from Shadow Decay. So you can see it coming out here in a second. So you can see the group here takes the ticking AoE damage. We actually have a death, so perfect reason why you want to stay healthy if you're a healer so that they don't have to worry about you. If you're a tank that has ways to help your team, like maybe a prop pally, definitely you can sack people here, lay on hands if needed. Same goes for the second boss obviously too. The second boss, if you're a tank that can help your team, definitely do so. This boss usually rotating party defensives and raid defensives anyway. We have mass barrier, AMZ, and the priest's barrier, so we should be fine. So I always position the boss here as tank, so that the DPS can aim the frontal down that way, and I can just back up with the tank hit. So you'll see what I do. I back up and then I charge back in. Mechanic is actually super cheese as Prot Warrior because you can just press charge as soon as you get hit with the tank hit and you don't really go anywhere. Other tanks will go flying backwards, potentially into mobs. So I know that a lot of tanks position themselves against the fence or the light posts so that when the tank hit goes off, they just get knocked into the fence and don't go anywhere. But Again, like I said, Prot warriors kind of cheese. They can just charge back in right after the tank hit. So, about to get hit again. No defensive here. Took 35% hit with no defensive. So, again, on a low enough key like this one, you can probably just have shield block and full mitigation up. You do need a pretty big ignore pain shield though to survive that tank hit. So. Make sure you at least have a lot of ignore pain up and shield block if you're going to take that with no defensive. So I do ask for PS on the next one. I can't remember if the healer gives it to me or not, but he does give it to me, so I don't take much. With the ads, you also want to help stun and kick as a tank when they spawn. Just noteworthy there. So the AoE's going off here. The priest has barrier up, so we're probably going to be pretty healthy. DK is going to have AMZ up, as you can see below my health bar. So the next one we should be fine too. I pop wall here. Yeah, on high keys, that gets pretty scary. You definitely want a defensive for every single tank hit, and if you don't have a defensive, you want to call for an external from your healer. You know, a health pod or self-heals isn't going to work because you need to mitigate the initial damage, so you do need to figure out a way to have some type of defensive for every one of these. So last stand was up there. DK pops AMZ here. So this fight is really just the tank juggling their defensives on the tank hit, and then everyone else juggling party and raid defensives on the AoE. And then it's, you know, just dodging the frontal and CCing the ads. So it's a very scripted fight. I pop wall here. Super scripted fight. It's just execution based, right? It's there's no RNG really. Just play well in that fight and you'll live. So this won't be a 2 chest. Definitely 2 chestable on a 14 and even a 15. I've seen a lot of people 2 chest a 15 if you're fast enough with no deaths. But this time we were just a little slow. So you want to pull this guy to the middle, close to the middle of the ship as possible, because he spawns ads, and if you're in the middle, the ads are going to be more spread out than maybe all on one side, which would be hard to group. So you see here, they kind of spread out nicely around the boss. It makes it a lot easier to, or around the mini boss, makes it a lot easier to gather. So I've just found that if the mini boss is in the middle of the ship like this, then the ads spawn nicely. But yeah, this is just a matter of kicking all the ads and gathering them in as a tank, making sure you have aggro. Send all your stops, everything here, because there's so many chain casts. One of them gets through at the wrong time and your DPS could get one shot. So, because there is the channeled, the single target channels that go out on the DPS here. So yeah, you can see the mage and the boomy have a dot there. So if they have that ticking channel dot and some casts go off on them, they could definitely die. So use your defensives here, use your offensive CDs. You can send all your offensives here as well, because phase 1 of the last boss isn't really anything. So yeah, just send your offensives on that pull. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to charge in here. Disclaimer, you always want to stay in melee range of this boss as a tank. If you leave melee range for like more than 2 seconds, the boss is going to do a bursting AoE on your team and you're going to die within like a few seconds. I made that mistake earlier on in the season. I think I like intervened a teammate to try and help them out a little bit, and I was away from the boss too long and it just did its pulsing damage and like one-shot the whole group. So it's basically an instant wipe if you leave melee too long, so just never do that as a tank. I don't really intervene people on this boss, even though it gives them like a little 10% absorb shield. It's just not really worth it for safety reasons on this boss. You can go ahead and send CDs if you have them on this phase 1 as well, because by the time you land again For phase 2, you'll have them if you're a 2-minute class. If you're a 3-minute class, I would probably hold them for the next phase. But this phase is scripted. It's just dodging the frontal, pressing defensive on the AoE, and throwing bombs at the boss. So one thing about this, if you didn't know, is you can just fly directly to the platform. As you see, I just completely ignore the orbs. They fixed this earlier on in the season where you didn't have to grab any orbs. You used to have to grab a ton of orbs to stay alive, but you could just fly right from the ship to the platform. No matter where the ship is, you can fly here, so don't ever worry about it. Just make sure you're flying over here fast and not taking your time, because you will die, but just come straight here. So we have Lust, our DPS have cooldowns, A-Bomb Limb, Combustion, Incarn, so we're just going to send Damage Pot, Lust, all CDs here, and this boss is going to burn really fast at the start. So again, this is a scripted fight, just dodging the frontals. DPS have to move out with their circles, and there's just the AoE damage on the party that you just want to cycle raid defensives for, like AMZ, Barrier, Zephyr if you have it. So scripted fight, you just want to make sure you mechanically play clean, and you'll be fine here. DPS need to press defensives when they take out the circles, because those do huge damage on high keys. But yeah, as a tank, this boss is a joke. You take almost no damage. You don't really need to ever press a defensive. Only reason I see you needing to press a defensive is if you accidentally got hit by a frontal and you got pretty low, and maybe the AoE was coming up, you would probably want to press a defensive just to be safe. But if you play this mechanically clean, you don't even need to press a defensive as a tank. It's literally just keep your mitigation up and use your offensive CDs. That's it. So yeah, this boss burned fast. I mean, it's only got just over a percentage left. That's why you want to hold Lust and all your CDs for this phase as a group. So we got another AoE coming up here. Mage uses Mass Barrier, so makes that pretty easy. There's not much else to say here, but before the video ends, I just wanted to say shout out to making group compositions, because as you get higher keys, you do want to put a lot of thought into your group composition. And I know that's not something everyone does, something that I didn't do for a long time, but having the right group composition can really make or break your key. So some things to think about, especially for this dungeon and some others this season, are: do you need party or raid defensives like AMZ, Mass Barrier, Zephyr, Priest Barrier? And for Dawnbreaker, you definitely do. City of Threads, you also do. On the 3rd and 4th boss, it's great to have those things. So think about that when you're forming a comp. Think about, what dispels do I need? Do I need Poison Dispel, Curse Dispel? How many of them do I need? Do I have Lust? Do I have Battle Res? Do I have a triple melee comp? Is that going to be dangerous? So yeah, just wanted to shout that out, to think about when you're forming groups. It could make or break your key. So that's it for this video. I'll probably have 1 or 2 more commentaries this season coming. I know I've done Grim Batal, I've done Arakara. I don't know if I'm going to do every dungeon. It does take a while to film these commentaries. And I know that the season is already late, so a lot of people probably already know what's going on, but I don't film these commentaries to help you learn the dungeon. I basically film these commentaries to help you understand what I'm thinking of as a Prot warrior. So it's more about learning the class than it is learning the dungeon, which is why I may not do every dungeon. The season's almost over. Might do 1 more of these, we'll see, but I'll definitely be posting highlights of gameplay and maybe some discussion videos about Season 2 when it gets closer, and potentially some PTR testing videos. So stay tuned for those. I appreciate the support, you guys, and see you in the next one.